Okay, so in the previous part, we talked extensively about the different regions in Genshin Impact and just some of the background details. This time, I want to focus more on what went wrong. How did we get here in this world? And with that, I mean both the system or the way the world runs and is governed, but also how did we get to this stage in the media industry and in the media industries, and specifically in the gaming industries and the game media industries, a stage where there's rampant Orientalism and there is this exoticization and otherization of cultures that are not seen as European or white. And to complement that, there's of course the supremacization of Western and European or white cultures. Supremacization might not be a word, I just made that up, but I think the meaning was clear. So I talk extensively about, this framework and this world and how are we here, and cat in the background, and I've been talking a lot about deconstructing the current state of the game media industries. So what do I actually mean by that? So what I perceive in this world, and what is largely supported by loads of material and immaterial evidence, is that we currently live under a largely capitalist and very authoritarian organization of our economies, of our nations, and even of the ways we personally interact with each other and the ways we consume media and produce it. So this is the framework within which I currently perceive the game media industries, and definitely Genshin Impact by association. Now, I have to describe here something that might seem a little counterintuitive. Genshin Impact was not produced by Western studios. It was produced by a Chinese studio. The corporate base of the studio for international purposes is in Singapore. So it is not exactly a Hollywood production or anything like that. But it is still adjacent in the sense that it targets a lot of the same people. Because a lot of the creator economy surrounding gaming is situated in North America and Europe when it comes to English-speaking audiences and facing an international audience. Of course, gaming influencers and creators are also, they exist in other countries and other markets. The Chinese domestic market is massive for gaming and gaming content, production and consumption of gaming content. But it is not very international or global-facing. Whereas the global-facing market tends to be present or concentrated in traditionally Anglophone societies, especially the US and Canada. Now, these things that I described do not exist in a vacuum. Once again, they influence the way we interact with everything in our lives. So, while a big part of my thesis is that it is probably not malice that leads to these cultural representations in Genshin Impact being lacking or sometimes distasteful or disrespectful even, it would be disingenuous to say that they still don't matter. Now, I talk a lot about whiteness in this video, and Europeanism, or Eurocentrism, and US hegemony and Western media hegemony. These concepts necessitate an other. So if there's a Western or European or US American hegemony, there are people who are being subjugated by definition. And in this global order, under this capitalist system, it is usually the people of what is known as the Global South, especially the Middle East or the Orient, the Near East, who are exploited culturally and economically and in many, many different ways. So, while there possibly isn't any intent of malice on the part of Genshin Impact developers or any other game developers, it is still very critical to realize that their ignorant, naive, distasteful, disrespectful, possibly malicious representations of peoples from the Middle East and the Indian subcontinent and North Africa are harmful because they perpetuate systems of hegemony, and they perpetuate the ways that people who aren't white and who aren't European have been portrayed in media for decades at this point. Also very important for understanding this current situation is that, quote, one ought never to assume that the structure of Orientalism is nothing more than a structure of lies or of myths, which, were the truth about them to be told, would simply blow away. I myself believe that Orientalism is more particularly valuable as a sign of European Atlantic power over the Orient than it is as a veridic discourse about the Orient. End quote. It is, of course, in the structures of this Orientalist world and this capitalist world, this kind of media industry, that Genshin Impact was born. And the storytelling and character development of the people of Sumeru definitely follows signs of what Edward Said was describing as Orientalism throughout his book. The people are mystified and otherized in Sumeru. It's full of weird sorcery and belly dancing and spooky music and strange otherworldly character designs. And the region is entirely either forest or desert, nothing in between. It is like merging together the two most basic stereotypes of Indian subcontinent geography and Arabian Peninsula geography, completely cancelling out the geographic and geological diversity of the regions spanning from Morocco all the way to Pakistan and India and Bangladesh. It is truly an oversimplification and an abstraction of an already abstract and highly politicized concept of the Middle East, and a very Orientalist concept that is used again to separate people and to assume that the origin of culture and civilization is white Europeanism, and that everyone else is a pretender to that throne. One of the most obvious elements of this Orientalist framework of thought that permeates every aspect of Sumeru is the character design, which haphazardly includes elements all the way from Amazigh cultures to Nubian cultures, Persian textiles and accessories, Arabian Peninsula. The whole region is haphazardly put together without regard to its individual constituent cultures, without regard to its many peoples and their histories. And this is truly the height of Orientalist media. This is also exemplified by just attitudes of people in the real world. For example, many people associating Islam with being Arab exclusively, even though only about 12% of Muslims globally are Arab. But this is glossed over by global media in general, and Islam is seen as this exclusively Arab thing, and Arabs are seen as exclusively Muslim. And this is used to justify a lot of heinous hate crimes, and is used to create sweeping statements about peoples that the people making these statements know nothing of. So it is quite dangerous and disrespectful and frankly nauseating as an appreciator of this whole region to see our diversity and our inherent humanity being completely trampled over in the service of creating media caricatures of entire cultures for the sake of profit. Even linguistically, where one would think differentiation would be much easier, especially on people who perhaps have no experience with or knowledge of this region, Sumeru fails miserably. There are different location names that are in Arabic, next to location names that are clearly inspired by Persian linguistic and cultural elements. There's influence of Hindi and Urdu. And all of this just happens completely indiscriminately and haphazardly. Even hiding behind the fact that it is a fictional region does not make sense, because many fictional regions have fake languages or fake place names that are very obviously abstractions and fictionalizations. Yet when it comes to Sumeru, one reading these names could potentially feel that they're supposed to feel real. But for anyone that actually speaks any of these languages, or is familiar with any of these cultures, it is immediately in the territory of the uncanny valley. It is, frankly, quite disturbing. And one does not see this effect with a place like Mondstadt, for example. I am a German speaker, and I am aware of many of the terms and nouns that are used in that region and by the characters from that region. None of it feels uncanny valley. Sometimes it feels ridiculous or funny because it's supposed to be a fictionalization. It's supposed to be surreal almost. And it works. That effect is achieved perfectly. But with Sumeru, it feels like it is stemming from a place of ignorance and naivete, rather than a deliberate parody or an attempt at making funny or light-hearted content. Even colorism, which is usually seen as an element of old-school racism, is highly present here. There are so few characters in Sumeru that are dark-skinned. Most of them are they look like any other characters in the game. And that is a huge oversight. It is frankly unreasonable at this point that we are still accepting that light skin should be the default of any in-game characters. What I must note at the end here, and what is very important for understanding the next part, where I will discuss possible solutions or ideas around fixing this, is that the amalgamation of cultures or the intersection of identities happens in the real world. There are people who belong to multiple cultures, and there are places in this world where one will have different places bordering each other that are named in different languages. That is a thing. But in the real world, things don't happen according to the arbitrary visions of game developers. The way it happens in the real world is organic. It is born of social pressure. It is born of politics. It is born of cultural changes. It is born of demographic changes. It is born sometimes at the individual level of simply two parents from different cultures marrying. These things don't happen randomly or accidentally. And the way it has happened in Sumeru, and the way these different cultures of a vast region were put together as one, it was disrespectful. But just haphazardly taking different cultural elements and throwing them together is not a way to address that respectfully. It is a way of upholding current power structures and delaying any positive and constructive discussion and conversations surrounding diversity and cultural representation in media.